Welcome back, everyone. Hi, if you're new, my name is Tori, and today I'm going to take you guys through the 5 books that I read in the month of February. Overall, it was a really great month. I enjoyed 4 out of the 5 things I read. Unfortunately, there was one book in here that was a bit of a disappointment. I'm not too mad about it. It was bound to happen eventually. Things were going a little bit too well from my reading so far in 2020. So this is the first disappointing book of 2020 that is making this list. Let's get started with the great things that I read this month. And the first one is The Deep, and this is by River Solomon. And it's also with Devi Diggs, William Hudson, and Jonathan Snipes. In this, we are following this character named Yetu. Yetu and her people, they are the descendants of pregnant African slave women who were thrown overboard. And so they have lived underwater for generations at this point. And Yetu is a historian, so she alone is kind of the sole keeper of all of these really painful and traumatic memories that her ancestors have experienced firsthand. And so once every year, they have this ceremony called the Remembering, where in a kind of controlled and safe environment, Yetu releases these memories to her people. But the Remembering comes around again, and Yetu just can't do it. She just completely bails on the whole ceremony and flees to the surface. And it's on the surface where she finds comfort and solace that she's been missing underwater, and basically has to make the really important decision of if she's really going to return home and return to these responsibilities that she has. I love this so much. And it's so tiny, but I read this over the course of a couple days just to take my time with it. This was so good. I love witnessing that leap in River Solomon's writing from An Unkindness of Ghosts to this novella. I mean, they were already a great writer with An Unkindness of Ghosts, but I just feel like a lot of the voice and the tone and everything is just so much more tightened. And I don't know, I love seeing writers progress through their work. It was great. It was a joy to read. The next book I read in February was actually a poetry collection, so that's new. But I read Hum, and this is by Jamaal May, and this is actually Jamaal May's first poetry collection. I read the second one. I'm blanking on the title of the second poetry collection, but that was amazing. I read that a couple of years ago now, and I still think about that collection. There is a poem in there I will never forget. It's called The Gun Joke. It is so good. You need to just read the whole collection just to get to that particular poem. So this is the first collection, and this was fine. I didn't really have the reactions that I had to a lot of the poems in the second poetry collection. This very much feels like a first poetry collection, whatever that means. Overall, I thought this was fine. It was, there's definitely poems in here that are more hard hitting than others, I think, that made me feel more things than others in here. But overall, pretty solid. I'm happy I read it. But if you do pick up a collection by Jamaal May, please, please, please let it be his second one. That was amazing. But I mean, I'm still happy I read this. The next book I read in February was one that I did not like at all. This was the disappointing read. I thought I was enjoying this book, and then as I was getting closer to the end, and then finally when it was over, I was like, wow, I really just sat through this. And that book is One Word Kill, and this is by Mark Lawrence. I don't even know what else to say. I did not like this book. This book is marketed as, what was it marketed as? It was marketed as Ready Player One meets Stranger Things. Okay, I can kind of see the Stranger Things aspect to it. So anyways, that was already one of my first gripes about this particular novel. So One Word Kill, we're following this main character. I'm already blanking on his name. I think his name is Nick. And in the 80s, Nick finds out that this is not funny, actually. In the 80s, he finds out that he is diagnosed with leukemia. And so the book is kind of, Nick trying to just go through his normal school day. He's kind of nerdy, can't really talk to girls, that kind of thing. And then the other half of his life now is getting chemotherapy treatments. But he really finds comfort and kind of forgets about the problems that he has in the rest of the world when he has these Dungeons and Dragons sessions with his friends, like once a week. All right. One day, everything really changes for Nick and his group of friends when 2 things happen. When this girl named Mia joins the Dungeons and Dragons group, and it's like, whoa, where'd you come from, girl? And so she joins the group, but then also this strange man approaches Nick and needs his help with something. And that is all I'm going to say about that, because there's a very large plot in the works in this book. And I mean, that's really all you can talk about, because there is definitely some sci-fi-y things happening in here. So that's all I'm gonna say about that. But I mean, overall, I don't know. I wasn't into it. A lot of the prose just really wasn't doing anything for me. The dialogue in so many places was just so cringy, and a lot of the Dungeons and Dragons scenes were just like going over my head, and I was like, my mind was wandering so much, and just the logistics of the plot after a while were just getting so messy, in my opinion. I think this is the first in a series. I will not be reading the rest of the series. That much is for sure. The next book I read in February is one I've already spoken about, and this is Version Control, and this is by Dexter Palmer. This was in my Black Mirror episode. This was in my Black Mirror recommendations video. If you have not seen that, I will leave a link in the description or somewhere. I had fun with that video. Version Control, we're following this woman named Rebecca, and she is trying to cope with a tragedy that has happened to her recently, her and her husband. And she is just falling deeper into a depression because of what happened, and really trying to cope with everything by drinking. Rebecca's husband, Philip, he is a physicist, and Philip and his team, they have been building something like a time machine, although they do not want you to call it a time machine. They're very particular about that, so do not call it a time machine, but that's what they're building. So they're building this time machine, and the more experiments that Philip starts, conducting, the more Rebecca finds that her reality is just getting a lot weirder. It took me forever to read this book. I read it throughout the entire month of February, and by the time I was finished with it, I just felt like I had been on a really long and really wild journey. I really love this book. It can feel a bit slow and maybe a little bit tedious in a lot of places because you are in Rebecca's head a lot and experiencing the world as she sees it, and as things start to get warped, you're seeing that too. But there's silently character development happening throughout it, and a lot of Rebecca's long-winded inner dialogue is just so good in so many places. I really enjoyed this. And then the final book that I read in February, this was amazing. This author is one of my favorite authors of all time now. I just want to read everything she has ever written. I want to own everything she's ever written. This was incredible. And this was Parable of the Sower, and this is by Octavia E. Butler. Holy crap. This is the first book in the Earthsea duology. So this takes place in our very near future of a few years from now. And we're following this main character named Lauren Olamina. And at the start of the novel, Lauren is about 15 years old, and she has this gift known as hyperempathy, where she can basically feel everything that happens to people around her, which is, that's crazy. But Parable of the Sower is taking place in this world that has been devastated by climate change, a really bad economy, and just people are really desperate, and the world is really collapsing. And so Lauren and her community, they live in this gated environment. Lauren's father is a pastor and really trying to keep the community together in a lot of ways. But, Lauren is telling us the story through a series of her journal entries. And in these journal entries, she's really not only questioning, the things that are happening in the world, but also her father and her father's religion and religion just overall. And she begins to sow the seeds, if you will. She begins to really sow the seeds of a new faith and a new religion known as Earthseed. This was really incredible. It takes place over the span of a few years. We follow Lauren from 15 to 18 and start seeing not only the world changing, but her community breaking down, and Lauren really having to stand up and take the lead in so many situations. And this book is amazing. So you have to go pick up Parable of the Sower. You have to go read Kindred. I need to go read Parable of the Talons. We all have things to do now. So that is it for me, you guys. Like I said in the very beginning of the video, February was a really great reading month. Or maybe I didn't say it. That was a while ago now. It was a great reading month. Aside from that one book that we will not talk about again, I highly recommend all of these. Like I said with Jamaal May, I recommend his second poetry collection before this one, but overall I had a great month. Let me know down in the comments how your February went. What are some of the books that you read throughout the month? And I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.